We begin by acknowledging the land and our responsibility to care for and respect all that provides us with life. This land upon which HDSB is situated is on the ancestral treaty and title lands of the Anishinaabeg, Ojibwe, Mississauga Nation, now known as the Mississaugas of the Credit. Mississauga territory in the past and present continues to host both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. The HDSB is committed to continuous knowledge building with respect to actions that address and resolve the ongoing impacts of colonialism. We do this by learning and understanding the true history, treaty obligations, duties and responsibilities, and Indigenous rights, while actively maintaining mutually beneficial relationships and collectively respecting and caring for the land. And with that, I think it's time that we introduce ourselves, Pardeep, to the audience.
Great. So thank you very much, Director Ennis. My name is Pardeep Singh Nagra. I'm the Human Rights and Equity Advisor for the Halton District School Board. Next, I'll ask Mobeen to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mobeen, and I am a grade 11 student at Thomas A. Blakelock High School. And currently, I am the secondary chair or the co-chair of the Kindness, Connection, and Community Subcommittee in the Student Senate for the HDSB.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll ask Saisha.
Hi, my name is Saisha. I'm a grade 6 at Clarksdale Public School. I am our Student of Excellence this year, and I was our first Student Senate.
Thank you. Jessica?
Hi, everyone. My name's Jessica Hellick. I'm a grade 5-6 teacher at Clarksdale Public School, and I'm excited to be part of this tonight.
Great. Chair Collard?
Hi, my name is Amy Collard, and I'm a trustee in Burlington, Ward 5, and the chair of the board.
Thank you. And Professor Binfet.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Tyler Binfet. I'm a professor at UBC, University of British Columbia, and I am a kindness researcher. And so I study how students like Mobeen and Saisha understand kindness and bring it to life in school, and really how kindness can help kind of shift the temperature in schools. So I'm really excited to be talking to you today about this.
Oh, we're going to be looking forward to your insights as well and hearing from the students, as you mentioned. So, you know, what's interesting is that when we went through the journey of creating our new multi-year strategic plan for the Halton District School Board, and we landed with this commitment of kindness, connection, and community. It's interesting because many people would wonder, why would an organization have this as one of their multi-year strategic plan commitments? And I know when we went through that journey, we're also reflecting upon some of our past commitments, which still are in our multi-year strategic plan. For example, wellness, right? We wouldn't have thought maybe 20 years ago that an organization, a school board, or any other institution would have probably put wellness as part of their multi-year strategic plan. And now nobody thinks or blinks an eye about it. And so similarly, you know, the multi-year strategic plan is the caretakers are really the trustees at one level, and then it trickles down through the organization. So I'd love to hear from Chair Collard, her reflection on this being part of our new multi-year strategic plan.
Thanks so much for that, Pardeep. I have to tell you, when we were sitting in the boardroom, there was about 30 of us, all huddled in about 6 or 5 groups of superintendents and trustees working together. And Director Ennis turned to me and said, kindness should be one of our commitments. And I thought, what a great idea. And soon the idea spread very quickly. And we had people saying, you know what, this is really important. And it's important not just because it's good to be kind. It's important because of the polarized world that we're living in right now, that we need to be spreading this sense of valuing the people that sit across the table from us, valuing the people whose lives are different than ours, and ensuring that we're giving everyone the kindness that we would expect them to give to us. So it was a very old principle, but a little bit of a new spin on it, to love your neighbor. If we're not loving our neighbors, then how do we get along? if we're not kind to one another, then what does that say about us as a society? And so, yes, I was very happy to champion that, but I have to give all the credit to Director Ennis.
Well, and that's great to hear, because I think it's important for people to even know sometimes the process of how sometimes ideas come up and where they land, and sometimes the momentum they may take. And I think for us, that we also, while kindness was important, we want to ground it in something a little bit deeper, in terms of what kindness may look like or feel like. And we combined it with concepts like connection and community. And 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 so, Professor Benfet, my first question, just on a personal professional level, was, why study kindness?
Well, let me say, Pardeep, first, this is really, really forward thinking by the Halton School District, because you'll see, if you look at the mission and vision statements of school districts or individual schools, kindness will sometimes be nested or in the shadows. This is really at the forefront. It's one of the 6 commitments. It's up there with mental health and well-being. This says this is a priority. And so I'm really just, again, excited to be talking about this. There are a number of reasons why we should study kindness. Really briefly, we see, and I've got dogs in my office, folks, if that's shaking collars and all kinds of stuff. I run the BARK program. Mobeen and Saisha, at the university, we have 64 therapy dogs, and I run a program called BARK, and we have therapy dogs in classrooms all across campus. It's a really lovely thing. So a couple of the dogs are in my office here. We see, when students are kind, we see a whole host of well-being benefits. So we see an increase in joviality. We see increase in social connection. Students feel connected to others, and they feel connected to their school. And then on the flip side, we see a reduction in stress and a reduction in loneliness. So when we introduce or do deliberate acts of kindness or intentional acts of kindness, not random, but deliberate, we see a whole host of benefits. So Pardeep, you asked me why, and there are multiple reasons. I wrote a whole book called Cultivating Kindness, on trying to convince educators of the benefits of kindness.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to be hearing some of that enthusiasm, Chair Collard, that you're talking about, of how it's already been embraced. As we've heard through the introductions, we have Jessica, who's a teacher that's been really engaging this work in the classroom and in the school, and Mobeen and Saisha. And so probably I want to start off with Jessica to say, what motivated you to take on this one of the aspects of our commitments of the multi-year strategic plan of kindness, connection, and community.
Well, at our school, we have the Wolfpack leaders, and each month our Wolfpack leaders hold character trait assemblies, and they're traits that we decided upon in our Wolfpack leaders and within our staff. So kindness is a trait that we had during the month of December, and we encourage all of our students to demonstrate kindness, and our staff demonstrate kindness. We do it through an opening assembly at the beginning of December. And our Wolfpack leaders model what kindness looks like, feels like, sounds like. They role model for the school, they sing songs, and then we continue celebrating kindness throughout the month of December. December is a good month to do kindness because it is a very festive season for many of our students. So a lot of teachers had kindness challenges in their classrooms where they were encouraged to do a different act of kindness each day. And then our grade 5-6 classes, we made cards of cheer for the local Bethany home, which is like a mental health and wellness home. And then all of our students walked over and we visited with the people who lived there, and we delivered our cards. And they were just to spread cheer and motivation to all those people who might have needed some extra cheer throughout the month of December. And we celebrate it during the month of December, but then we also encourage it throughout the rest of the school year too. So we build upon it with our next character trait assembly. So we keep revisiting it. It's not just like a December thing. We continue to spread kindness throughout the remainder of the school year. And just most importantly, just foster a positive learning environment within our school to build stronger relationships between our staff and our students, and just lots of motivation and encouragement. And we find that with spreading kindness, it also helps with mental health and well-being of our students as well.
Yeah.
It just cultivates positive character traits throughout the school year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as Professor Binfet had said, you know, and when we look at why we've included those extra narratives with kindness, connection, and community, you know, social connections. You talked about the school climate and for students connected. You know, Professor Binfet talked about the concept to less loneliness, and you shared that piece around that aspect that you guys were, you know, having the students to be able to kind of have some lens for which to see what are the social interactions at the schools to make sure that if they see some people to engage with them as well. And so, you know, it's quite exciting to hear a lot of those activities and the connections of how important and how it manifests in our school. And so, you know, Shaisha, when you had an opportunity to engage in kindness, how did it make you feel, first of all?
It made me feel like a sense of gratitude that I'm able to make somebody else's day better. And it's just a really great feeling when you do something good for someone and you see them feel better and feel happier. It just makes you feel like a way better person.
And you know, and that's a beautiful thing because what I have a sign from a colleague, and I just by accident random seen it today, and it said, uh, and I'll read it out. It says, "Be kind, and kindness would find you back." Right. And so it's interesting, just Shaisha, hearing you saying, when I do something, it also makes me feel good. And so look at that double win, right? We don't expect anything back. But, you know, I remember when I was asked from our communications team um, uh, about kindness, I said, smile, because when you smile, you get a smile back, right? And it's just a simple gesture that will, no matter what and how somebody's feeling, when they're approached or see a smile, they'll probably smile back, right? And so no, it's great to hear. And so you had a chance to engage yourself, and was there any special moments that really stood out for you when you've been engaging in this kind of work around kindness, connection, and community in your school?
Well, for example, when we, during the month of December, when we took our cards down to the people at the Bethany residence, just making them like they had a better day after that. And it was really special to be meeting them and making their day better, like in person, by doing something that maybe no one has done for them before, and just doing something good for someone special.
Yeah, and you know, that's another element, and about that in-person contact, right? Because so much of our pieces now, we think it's in person because we're on our phones talking or texting or social media or Instagramming or whatever to somebody else, but it's something totally different when, just like the smile, when you actually see it in person and live, it's different. The whole body language and demeanor, and so yeah, getting to really experience that kindness, not just a letter that then gets delivered by mail or by somebody to them and they read them, but having that opportunity, I think, is a special moment. So thanks for sharing that too. And so, Mobeen, you know, you have a couple of interesting roles, right? Because you're taking a leadership role from a student senate perspective as well. And so what drew you to be leading kindness, connection, and community?
So I really found like the subcommittee as being really interesting. And in terms of kindness connection, like when I think about it, I feel like they're all connected to each other in different ways, right? Like when I go to school, I think it's really important that like when you say hi to teachers and when you smile and good morning, I have a habit of like saying good morning to like teachers as I walk by and like students. And in a way, like I can't really get out of it, right? I've said hi to like so many teachers and like good morning. And then like you walk in the hall and if I don't say good morning to them, they would say back to me, which they usually don't. So I'm in a bit of like I'm stuck in that situation. But I really like it. And I think it's a good thing to have more kindness and connection and community. So I took on the role to see if I could help out a little bit.
No, and I think you're describing something as a father with a student in the Halton District School Board. I can tell you, uh, my son is more engaged with me about what happened at school when the teachers are engaged with him. If no teachers are generally engaged with him on any given day, and I say, "How was school?" Okay, it's okay. But any day that teachers have connected with my son, whether it's formally or informally, and he really enjoys the informal ones. Um, it really brings the best out of my son, and so those aspects of you were talking about, just acknowledging the adults in the school, in addition to what Sasha was saying about just the students as well, is critically important, because this relationship, I think, as Jessica will probably adhere to, is it's mutual, right? It's so when we're talking about community, we're talking about a school community, so everybody's kind of responsible for that. Director Ennis, you had shared in today's senior team meeting something interesting that happened from one of our schools, who initiated something related to a class project that a teacher put out, and they shared it with some staff of our Prime Minister, and our Prime Minister kind of shared something out. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Thanks so much, Pardeep. Yeah, certainly in one of our schools, Glen Williams, up in the hills, we had our Prime Minister Mark Carney interact with our staff and students, and they were able to share some beautiful letters with him about what their hopes and dreams were for Canada. And certainly, he expressed that he's never seen or heard such words from students at that age. And so I want to say how proud we are, first of all, of our students of Glen Williams, and indeed all of our students in the Halton District School Board, for the voice that they're giving to their world and trying to make a difference. So that was a wonderful piece. But I wanted to say a big thanks to the Board of Trustees, to Chair Collard, and all of the trustees for adopting this commitment of kindness, connection, and community in the multi-year strategic plan for the next 4 years, because I think it does make a difference. In fact, I was with some directors recently, and from across the country, and many of them had not heard of similar to what Professor Binfet said, they've not heard of a board that has elevated kindness, connection, and community in a way that is as prominent as we have made it. To the professor's point, most of the times it's sort of given a lesser role. And so I want to just congratulate and thank the Board of Trustees for that great work. One of the things that I did early in the adoption of this particular commitment is to challenge some students. As I spoke to Student Senate, I know Mobeen was there, but I challenged some students to do some acts of kindness in their schools, and I would love to hear about it. And Professor, I got my inbox just a lot of students sharing all of the wonderful things they were doing in their schools to support this particular commitment to kindness, connection, and community. And I also want to give thanks to our schools, because I can tell you the work that Jessica is doing and many of our other staff. When I traveled around, before we adopted this, when I traveled around to all of our schools, I saw kindness everywhere. And so that really just gave me the impetus to say, this is something that we need to elevate. And it's something that I am wondering, Jessica, now that the board has really adopted this as a commitment, how does that make your work, better, easier? What strength does that provide for you?
Well, first of all, I think kindness brings happiness. And that's something that I've always tried to make sure that all my students are happy and they feel valued and loved in my classrooms. But I think it also really encourages inclusivity, making sure that everybody feels like they're included, whether in race or their culture, background, or their abilities. And it just ensures that everyone feels valued and included, regardless of their circumstances. And I think that's really important, because I feel like happiness brings success and makes school a happy place for all of them to want to come to every day.
I'll maybe jump in if I can. Really, what Jessica's talking about is they describe kind acts as sort of a glue, a social catalyst in the psychological literature that glues people together who otherwise might not get connected. And, when we think of the wolf pack, for example, that Jessica shows this leadership in her school and she steps in, and students, when I talk to young students like Saisha and Mobeen, they'll say kindness takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of guts to kind of be kind. And so to have the wolf pack as a framework allows students to step in. The one thing I want to remind folks, we often think of kindness as a big production, right? Mobeen said, I just say hi to teachers. It's low cost, low barrier. It's easy, accessible for everybody, right? I work with middle school students and they'll say, I'll say hi. And I say, what about eye contact? What about saying, how was your weekend? They say, no, not ready for that, right? They'll just say hi. And I'll take that. That's the starting point as we build this, what we call kindness confidence in students. But a really important point here is that Jessica is taking care of her own well-being by leading this. And so we often think, oh, it's for the students, but it's also for the teachers. Her classroom is different. The hallway interactions are different. Assemblies are different, all of that kind of stuff. So I want you thinking, folks, that we can also show kindness by restraining self-regulation. So I ask kids about kindness and they say, I don't laugh at a joke at somebody else's expense. That's an act of kindness. You restrain and hold back. So you can produce something or you can hold back. So I'll leave it there.
No, it's important. And Jessica, you touched on something really important, and then I'll probably kind of move this forward to Chair Collard in a way, because you're talking about intersectionalities. You're mentioning diversity and equity, and I know my colleagues from the Indigenous Department, when we were speaking about kindness, they talked about kindness to the environment. Right. And so I hear Collard nodding, Chair Collard there. And so, these are all the different ways that kindness can both manifest and even intersect with the multi-year strategic plan, right? Because while we have that as a commitment, we've already heard some of the intersectionalities around well-being, right? We've heard the intersectionality around student achievement. Here's bringing some Indigenous perspectives too, that when they see that word, right, it's not just a human to human concept act, right? And thinking about what does it mean to be kind to the environment. So anything else around those kind of themes, Chair Collard, that you want to share or talk about, or even another topic?
I've always liked the word kind. For me, it goes much deeper than just being nice. Nice is kind of esoteric on the surface, but kindness comes from your soul, your heart. That's what makes you. It's what makes your life better, and what makes the people around you have a better day. One of the things I have signed off for my email on my personal account is be the reason someone else had a good day. And I know that for some people, just seeing that in my signature will make them smile. And, it's not something that I've had to do or say intentionally to that person, but they've seen it. And I also think too, from the trustee perspective, we're also responsible for the budget. And one of the things in the Education Act is that we must fund the commitments that we make in the multi-year strategic plan. So by elevating this to be one of our commitments, what we've basically said is we are prepared to fund this. We're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're saying this is important enough that we want to make sure that all students can access kindness, can generate kindness, can feel kindness, and to have it reciprocated. These are important things. Life's hard enough. Let's be kind. Let's be gentle. Let's show some appreciation for each other, and go easy on one another. Life doesn't have to be as hard as sometimes we make it.
Yeah, and as what's been shared for us at the end of the day, this is about our actions, our accountability, our intentionality, right? Both in terms of what we say and do and what we don't say and do, right? Because on the flip side, we know the consequences of not being kind. not being kind in words, not being kind in action, and not being kind in behavior, right? So whether it becomes issues that we're dealing with around physical issues among students, whether it's harmful language protocol. And so there's a lot at stake for us as a board, and and not and part of the larger picture for us is about nurturing some of these skills, because I think some aspects for just social interactions are getting less and less because of social media, whether the parents being on it, and so there's not conversations. I know there was an article that talked about just language development, right, being decreasing just because the primary people in the household that are responsible are the adults to help facilitate that. And if they're too preoccupied with social media, and then if you can see that kind of trend just continue, then the things that we would have naturally had connection and community and engagement and some checks and balances, for lack of a better word, in community, right, around things like kindness are not necessarily there. And we as a school board even had seen some of that impact post-COVID, right? When people were, for lack of a better word, more isolated. And some cohorts of our students, depending on their age, where some of those things would have been kind of reinforced or validated within schools, were not necessarily present. And we as a system are seeing some of those impacts. So, Shaya, is there anything, if we made you director for a day, and you were literally became the director of kindness for Halton District School Board, is there one thing that you would love to see happening in our schools or among students? Anything that comes to mind?
Nothing really directly comes to mind. Let's see. If I had to make sure that one thing was happening, it's everybody being inclusive, because I see many people are inclusive, but when I see someone left out, it just doesn't feel really right. I want everyone to have that feeling that this isn't right, and we need to incorporate everyone in everything we really do.
Well, and I think that's powerful, because like we said, we want to take kindness further. And so for you, what you just reflected upon about the inclusivity and not seeing somebody left out or feeling lonely is the next two key components. One is connection. So you want to connect them in, and then you want to foster an inclusive community, right? And so I think those are, really strong words of wisdom. And so you might have potential to be director and for a day for kindness, and who knows, we might call you on that.
I think I would make a great director. Let me tell you one thing about the research with that. Did you know that if we ask students to be kind, 80% of the time they're kind to people they know already? So when I hear you saying, hey, there's kids that are left out, we have to be really careful that when we do kindness initiatives, and I haven't seen the wolf pack, but I imagine it's very inclusive, that we can't kind of free range it, because if we just say go and be kind, students will be kind overwhelmingly to kids they already know. And we want to make sure that everybody is on the radar, right? So that's where the teachers come in, and school principals can help organize, structure a little bit, give a bit of the kind of bumpers on the bowling lane for kindness. But we want everybody, when we're doing acts, to be a recipient. So that's really, really important. Look who just joined me here.
There you go.
That's Henry.
And
okay, I'll stop there.
Professor Binfet, thank you for that. Certainly when I asked students to send me acts of kindness, I heard from a number of students who shared with me that they went out of their way to include someone they've never spoken to, someone who was left out. And so those were particularly, I felt those had lots of good results for acts of kindness. And I was wondering, Professor Binfet, certainly Chair Collard, myself, and all the rest of the trustees, everyone, we want to see, create a culture of kindness in the board, so that there's not division and strife and hurt. We want everyone to feel a sense of belonging. Are we on the right track with this, trying to create that culture?
Yeah. I would really encourage, and when I do sort of consulting or Pro D workshops and things like this, we really emphasize as like foundational skills, empathic listening, right? We should revisit that and just stopping and not formulating an answer, a rebuttal right away, but just sitting in the information you receive. And then the other thing that sort of struck me, what in Pradeep's last sharing, was the importance of modeling at every level. When I ask kids, they will say, "Hey, did you see Miss Smith gave a cup of coffee to Mr. Niagara across the hall?" They are constantly watching. So don't underestimate the power of modeling. And so I would encourage all of the adults from the board of trustees all the way through the school system to really be intentionally modeling. And with the young kids, I'm like, everybody stop. I'm about to model kindness. Watch what I'm going to do. Like, I make it very explicit for them. And then as the kids get older, it can be more nuanced. But I would really, I just argue for empathic, active listening skills as a foundation for kindness, and then ample modeling at all levels.
Yeah, and then so we'll probably just ask one more question to Mubin around the kindness piece, because I think the other aspects of connection and community are really important discussion topics as well to go a little bit deeper into. And so, Mubin, for your work, for your subcommittee, is there anything you want to highlight in terms of some of the initiatives you are looking into or have done or are planning? Do you want to share anything as part of some of your committee work?
For sure. So we have been like in the planning of narrowing the list down, and we had like a big list of ideas that the subcommittee members discussed and wanted to implement. And with the help of the trustees, we narrowed it down to 3 ideas. The first one being that we wanted to have more like awareness on lesser known holidays that students might not like know about, but like student might be a part of that culture, but they would feel underrepresented because it's a small minority. And a lot of times it's like the bigger holidays such as Christmas and those types of big holidays that get represented more. So bringing more awareness to lesser known holidays. And then an idea that I had was making some posters, like student posters made by students that we could distribute with the help of the senators throughout like the board. Yeah, those are really the major ideas we have.
Sure. And as I mentioned, for us, we have kindness, connection, and community. And I'll again start with the students. When do you feel most connected? Right? And so if you think about moments as a student where you feel connected, who was it with? What were some of those modeling behaviors that made you feel connected to either the school community, your teachers, your classmates, or other students in your school? Shasha, you want to start us off a little bit there?
Of course. I often feel connected with my community or my classmates when I talk to someone new and we have a nice friendly conversation. It's a way of spreading joy, which makes it feel good, and basically just learning something new about someone you didn't really know before.
And Shasha, you keep adding words to me that I get to really play well with. And so, we started off talking about happy and happiness. And I know us as senior team, as part of our PD, unearthing joy, because they said, happiness relatively is moment by moment kind of piece itself. And where you want to get to a point of is the word that you just used, joy. And so for us, yeah, that's the path that we look at. And yes, happiness is a part of the path along the way. And ultimately, we want to kind of land at joy. And so, Jessica, what does it mean for you to connect with either your colleagues or your students? What does connection look like and feel like for you? Or what are some of your best practices that you want to share around connection?
as a teacher, I think it's just getting to know my students more than just them, but their families and their backgrounds and everything about them. I like to connect with parents often and just share celebrations that they might have and celebrate them in our classroom as well. I also wanted to mention too, I feel like as teachers, when we model kindness, we're also preparing our students for the future as well, because we're just giving them the confidence that they can deal with social situations by dealing with or using kindness as the solution to get through these difficult times.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that aspect. And when you were talking about parents, because one of the questions that had come out was, what partnerships can be built between teachers, the community, and parents of students at the schools to foster better understanding of students' needs and support, right? And so I think that messaging that you were talking about was the first part. You're talking about the students, right? You said, I want to get to know my students, and so it's first grounding the work and being student centered, and then facilitating through the parents as well. And that creates, because we've always said, and we know in the education system that parents and guardians and caregivers, they're equal partners for us as an educational system, and so having both connection and them being part of us as a school community is important. And there are different touch points naturally, and like you said, some of the earliest touch points are always the teacher, right? And the teacher of their of their child. And so that's critically important for us as part of that piece. Mobeen, do you want to, or Jessica, you were going to say something else?
No, I was just going to say that I've always just thought it was really important to build strong relationships within the classroom, but outside of my classroom too. And that also brings well-being and confidence as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely, and I think that's something that Professor Binfet had said in the earliest part of our conversation piece itself too, that how we approach it, because when you had said, some people don't find it that easy when we're saying being kind, right? Like they need to build up the confidence, right, just to feel comfortable enough in a space. Because part of what we're asking people to do is to be a little bit uncomfortable, because as Professor Binfet said, that generally when you ask somebody to do something nice, they're going to do it nice to somebody they already know, right? Because that's their comfort zone, right? And so building that confidence that, yeah, you can go up to, and I'm just going to say it in quotes, a stranger who is still a fellow student, but somebody who might not be within your circle there. And so, like you said, that starts building up a lot of life skills itself too, right? Mobeen, do you want to kind of answer that first question I was talking about, that when do you feel most connected in your school community?
So I really like the engaging teachers. I feel like the HDSB has a lot of great teachers, but some of them, like a lot of times you could obviously see that some teachers are a lot more engaging. And like they get up, they do a physical lesson, they give you like paper copies of things you can write, and the lessons are engaging. And that makes you a lot better connect with a lot of those teachers who like smile, ask about how your weekend went, rather than those who go straight into like teaching the lesson or give out the assignment. And I think that really helps out.
Yeah, I think you brought up some important pieces, just because, too often, if we just get in the monotonous of our roles, and it's not just teachers, it can be any one of us, right? I can walk in, and if I just come into the office thinking more about the meetings I have, the tasks needing done, the people I got to contact, my colleague I have to follow up with, you forget the space you're in sometimes, right? And so those connections are important, and it's really interesting, because I was going to now shift over to Chair Collard and kind of say, as chair of the board, and amongst trustees and senior team, because we have a very interesting, close relationship, just because of all the pieces and things we're engaged in. For example, as part of the multi-year strategic plan, school naming committee, or what have you. People don't realize how close the relationship is between the trustees and senior team itself too. And as chair, is there anything that you're thinking about, that you're hearing here, or that you have in mind going forward, that you want to kind of share out as either expectations or ideas about kindness, connection, and community?
Sure, go ahead. Put me on the spot. Usually I'm not at a loss for words. So here's an example of what you were saying about the closeness between the senior team and the trustees. When we have our board meetings, sometimes we have special announcements made. This last week, we had an announcement that Associate Director Salmini was retiring. And everyone around the room, whether they were a trustee or a staff person, gave Tina a standing ovation. Later in the meeting, we heard that one of the trustees was going to retire, and the exact same thing happened. And for me, that shows the amount of respect and genuine appreciation and the way that we get along. If the chair of the board and the trustees of the board and the senior team are not getting along, that might not happen. And so I think, the kindness that we show each other in those moments builds on the relationship and makes it stronger and better. And we get to know each other better in these vulnerable moments. And I'm really, it's really beautiful to see.
Great.
I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Chair Collett, you touched upon a really important question that came through to us from the community, because what you just talked about, where we ultimately want to get to in our intentionality, and the question is, how can we foster organic connections, right? And I think some of the aspects that you just alluded to was showing some of that organic connections of how things manifest themselves when situations present themselves at board meetings or when we're together in relationship, because that was one of the questions, right? Because as Professor Binfet said, and I think as everybody else said here too, that it's not just when we talk about random acts of kindness, right? It's not superficial, right? And while it may be a starting point, you want to get to a point where it just becomes organic, almost innate, just a part of our personality and becomes what you call organizational culture, right?
Well, Pardeep, I'll jump in. When I work with parents, I often tell them, or we get to this place where I say, just as you ask your children, have you done your chores this week? I want them to ask, have you done your kind acts this week? And because we want with children it to become sort of this integrated behavioral profile where they see the world through a kindness lens. I want to share, as the Okanagan sun is shining on my face here, and I can't figure that out here. I want to tell you, I have my students here at UBC do acts of kindness. They have to plan. And Pardeep, you said when it gets a bit uncomfortable, that's where the growth comes, right?
Yes.
If you're a baker, for example, and you just bake 6 muffins and give them away, that's your kind act every week. That's kind of standard. And I tell my students, step into the uncomfortable. Imagine this. A student had lived in an apartment building for 9 years and had never spoken to the neighbors on either side of her. And so for her kind act, I said, step into the uncomfortable, right? And so she created these gift baskets, and she described with a trembling hand, she knocked on her neighbor's door and she said, I'm afraid we've gotten into an unfortunate pattern of ignoring one another. I'd like to change that. And she said it took so much bravery and guts because they had just ignored each other for so long. And so then the neighbor said, oh my gosh, I'm glad you did it first. And then she got invited to bar mitzvahs and all kinds of wonderful, wonderful stuff. So step into this kind of uncomfortable to create comfort, right? So that I would encourage folks to consider. I think Mobeen's got a comment to share.
Sure. Mobeen has a comment, and then Director Ennis, I'll jump to you afterwards.
Okay, I'll put my hand down. Just as like an example, I have 4 classes, right? And in my first class and my last class this semester, I didn't really have a lot of people to sit with. And I walked into the class and I was like, where do I sit? So I sit beside someone I didn't know a lot. I just knew their name and their background, but I just sat beside them. And at first, I would say it feels uncomfortable. But as you get to learn more about people. I see it's really like interesting and it's a good opportunity. But something that I've been trying to, there's like a question I've been trying to answer is like, how do we get students more motivated? And over like the past few months that I've like wondered about it, I think when you're like kind to the students, for example, like the person I sit beside, a lot of times I'm like, so why aren't you doing your homework or something? And he's like, I'm bored, I don't like to do it, right? But when you try to like help them out a little bit, you see that sometimes they're having difficulties with it. Or like he might not know a lot of people. I'm like, do you know this person? You know that person? And then they're like, I don't talk to any of these people, right? They're too uncomfortable. They're too shy to go out there and talk to them. And yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how can we get people to be more engaged and to be more kind and to like put themselves out there?
Yeah, and I think you're bringing forth one of the most important pieces. First of all, you highlighted some really important aspects around student achievement, that what we might see on the surface and what might be the first answer, I'm bored, doesn't really give us the full detail of being bored. And is it bored because you don't have other social connections? Is it bored because you're having a little bit difficulty, so you're not staying on top of listening, and then it starts feeling boring? And then really of where we want to get to is how can we help? But it doesn't start with that, because even that would be intimidating for somebody if we even think and want to jump 3 steps before. And so I think one of the pieces that you're asking for is exactly what Jessica and a number of us have been saying over here, is that small step, a smile, those small incremental gestures to even make that person comfortable enough that they can disclose to you or anybody else and feel comfortable enough to seek and ask for help too. Because we know in situations it's not easy to get to that step of where you may be, and so you want to create a comfortable, nurturing environment, and not something that starts with where the problem is and saying, hey, you're not coming to class, so I want to make you come to class. You know how we always say you almost want to befriend them first, right? So I think you're bringing up some really, really great dilemmas for where and how kindness, connection, and community should land. Because at the end of the day, that colleague student of yours needs all three, so that we can start moving them on a path to necessarily not be bored, be more invested and interested in school, right? And so thanks for sharing that. I want to go back just to reflect on a comment from Professor Binfet, which I just love, because I think I'm going to go around and for me, I'm going to be speaking to the director at any time I see him. I'm going to say, so have you done your acts of kindness this week? So I'm going to do that director's report kind of piece on my own. So I love that question. I'm going to use it professionally already, and we know where it goes. Director Ennis, you were looking to share a few thoughts as well.
No, thank you so much, Party. Well, I wanted to expand a little bit on the community, the connection and community, because one of the things that I know Chair Collard and I and the trustees in general, and also, Party, could you mute, please? Sorry, I'm getting feedback.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much. The trustees and I and the entire senior team, one of the things we do is to engage with community, and the HDSB community writ large, and communities within the community, if that makes sense. And so we have to have a lot of conversations. And so one of the primary mode in which we sort of engage is to listen. And we listen to communities, and we listen to communities, and we listen to communities. And there are things and times and things that we can change, and we change the things that we can to make us better. And sometimes there are things that we have to work through. And so one of the things that I've noticed, though, Professor Binfet, is that sometimes Chair Collard and I are listening to communities within the community, but the communities are not necessarily listening to each other. And so that's part of the challenge, and part of what we want to, place where we'd like to get to, is where the communities are we're not just listening to communities and they're listening to us, but that communities are also listening to each other to help to break down. Because one of the things that I'm sure that your research would perhaps show, I'm not sure, but that if you get to know people, if you listen to them and get to know them, you don't fear them as much. And, so I don't know if you have any comments on that, Professor.
Well, when I listen to that, Director Ennis, I really think of a couple things. One is I like to see schools do what we call kind of incremental kindness. Maybe start with pair student to student kindness, maybe classroom to classroom kindness, classroom to whole school kindness, and then classroom to community kindness. But the flip side that I think really speaks to your question is, what about inviting the community into the school to do kindness? Right? So there's this bi-directional nature there. And then having or hosting, or maybe I could see Jessica, this would be her wheelhouse, right? Where she maybe has a community kindness fair, right? And the Wolf Pack is maybe helping organize that. But you invite and have this invitation in. And community members will step up in a heartbeat. I guarantee it. They love this kind of connection. But we often think it's from the school to the community, but it can be reciprocal in nature. And I would encourage that. But you're right. It really sort of, we call it, reduces our defenses. It's tough to be all kind of on guard when people are kind to you, right? So we see that it's, again, this social lubricant that unites or brings people together.
Professor, may I just ask though, may I just ask Professor Jessica, just let me ask this one question quickly. What happens when you're kind to others and they're not kind to you?
I really appreciate this, because we have to be very careful with kids, because I don't want them experiencing exactly that, right? Where we set them up and encourage them to be kind, and then they're met with unkind reactions for that, right? So that's that kindness, that confidence we want to build. And so teachers like Jessica would maybe orchestrate and create safe pairs initially. And then I think for older students, that's part of reality too. And I think Trustee Collard has spoken to this notion of, we're in a climate right now where it's quite commonplace to be sort of affronting. And so I think that's an invitation for reflection, an invitation for sort of self-monitoring, and this inventory we do around the character we have and how we want to kind of present the world. But, schools are training grounds for future citizens. And I always kind of think it's creating good neighbors, right? And it's this last training ground, especially for high school students. Mobeen's on his way there, that this is the last time, because once you get in the work world, people don't take the time to say, hey, I want to work on this skill with you. I want you to perspective take. I want you to consider the feelings of others, right? It doesn't happen. So here at UBC, we're always kind of thinking about students' social and emotional skills, right? And that's connected to kindness.
I was just going to add that often on the weekends, on Fridays, I'll tell my students I want them to do something kind out in the community. So they'll often say, what do you mean, Miss Hellick? And I'll say, well, hold the door open for someone, say hello to, or say thank you to the crossing guard. And then often on Mondays, I'll have students come back and they'll be like, Miss Hellick, I held the door open for somebody at the grocery store, or I helped somebody at the church on the weekend. And I love when they come back and tell me those stories, but I also have to encourage them and give them examples of how they can do kind acts out in the community as well. So it's not just in school, but I also say do things at home with your family as well. I say, help your mom clear the dishes off the dinner table, or help your little sibling, or read them a book at bedtime. And they're like, oh, Miss Hellick. But then they come back and they've got this big smile and a sense of pride, because they actually took my advice or took my suggestion and they wanted to do it outside of the community, and then it makes them feel good. And then they bring that happiness back into the classroom.
Jessica, for what you're sharing is the same dilemma as a parent, right? And so it's how do you nurture that motivation and action, right? And make it land, and then validate it and reinforce it and grow it, right? And so that also speaks to why it's critically important, because I think when we're here, and why we're here is because as much as we all like to believe that we're kind people, right? It comes back to what we've heard many times. Are we intentionally kind people, or do we just like to think of ourselves as kind people, right? And so even as adults, right? Because again, we can go into default mode, right? We can go into professional mode. I think, as Professor Binfet had said, that the last time that you're really going to have some of those pieces, and it reminds me sometimes of that poster we see, all I need to know in life I learned in kindergarten, and then it was reinforced for a few years in school, because those were the core pieces that are going to be reinforced, and then it stopped. and then you're in this professional world, and it never really gets brought in and nurtured enough. And I think that's going to be another aspect. I know today we focused a lot within a school and classroom and student environment as well, but we're reassuring that when we're looking at this as part of a commitment on a multi-year strategic plan, that we're looking at kindness throughout the whole system, as a system. And so if there's anybody that wants to share any last few thoughts, we just have a few minutes left before we wrap up. I know that for kindness, people have spent their lifetime in research on it. Other people are engaging it regularly. And we as system leaders are just absolutely excited about it, and probably can continue to speak longer on it. But yeah, just anybody with any last words you want to share before we wrap up?
Pardeep, I'll jump in and just say, what we see on this panel, and certainly with listeners who are tuning in, kindness is accessible. Trustee Collard talked about it. Director Ennis, Saisha, Moby, Jessica, all of us have some kind of experience. It is accessible to all of us, right? So in that way, I think we have the pathway is there for us to follow, to move forward and advance that. And really, I applaud the Halton School District around this, declaring kindness and connection and community as one of the 6 pillars. This is, or commitments, I think is the language you people use. That is just really, I think, forward-thinking, progressive, and it's really looking out for all the members of the school community, teachers, staff, students, administrators, so and parent community too, I'd add in there. So again, my hat's off to you as a sort of a concluding reflection.
No, I really appreciate that. And lots of reflection for everything we shared today. We've been also given some touch points, hearing from the students, some of the challenges and dilemmas. And Shaisha, go ahead.
Thank you. Before we ended, I wanted to tell you something about kindness. So I wanted to share a quote. It was spoken by Mahatma Gandhi. It is, "Be the change you want to see in the world." I think it's a very powerful quote because kindness is basically the same thing. We need to be the change we want to see. We kind of need to be role models so that everyone else can step up and be that too.
Thank you very much. I think the best way for us to always end, yep, I see the hearts and the love and the thumbs up, is with student voice. I think it's the most important voice for us as a system. And so I want to make sure that you did have the last words. The student did have the last word. And so with that, I first want to thank all our guests as part of this panel. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I know I'm going to take a lot back and reflect upon of how we can continue to move forward with kindness, connection, and community. For all the viewers, thank you very much for tuning in, and look forward to our next Directors Panel series, which may be happening around May. I think we're going to be most likely engaging Indigenous perspectives, and so look out for that as well. And keep connected with us. If there's something that sparked your interest as part of our conversation, do share out with us. We'll love to hear from you, and share your acts of kindness, connection, and community with us as well. I think we're all in this together, and I just want to say thank you very much to everybody once again, and have a wonderful and safe evening. Take care.